Welcome. My name is Edie Schaefer, and I am the chair of the Arts and Inventory Subcommittee of Buildings and Grounds. The members of the committee include Bob Trezevant, Wynn Garriolat, Sarah Patton, Diane Stevenson, Trudy Doyle, and Pat Benjamin. I would like to thank you all for your contributions to the committee. The committee gathered for the first time in the fall of 2019. There are currently 19 oil paintings in our inventory, and all of them are hanging around on the walls in the member lounge except for one, which is in storage at this time. Many of these paintings were donated as early as the 1960s. The Oak Park Area Arts Council has provided $3,500 in grants, and we have received $2,950 from individual donations. It is with much appreciation that we thank Marianne Perushnik, Becky Grajeda, and Ray Ward for their efforts on our behalf for gathering information, writing, and completing the grants. It is the committee's goal to continue the work of restoring every single painting. Our program today includes an introduction of Karl Kraft, an American painter by David Sokol, Professor Emeritus of the School of Art and Art History at the University of Illinois at Chicago. You will next hear from Bob Trezevant, who will speak about Blanche Wayburn Kerr. I would like to introduce Margaret Sawchuk of the Art Objects, who has restored many of our paintings and is here today to talk about restoration process, including cleaning, stretching, and the limitations of these procedures for each painting because each one has its own unique problems. One of her shops is right here on the 900 block of South Oak Park Avenue, which I walked by one day, and she was gracious enough to give me a tour. Margaret will be in the member lounge talking about her work. Let me tell you a little more about her. She studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in Krakow, Poland, then spent 10 years restoring Baroque art paintings in Austria. She has worked in New York City at the Laboratory for Conservation, and then she moved to Chicago and then Oak Park to continue her work. She not only works on oil paintings, but on sculptures, ceramics, furniture, and gilding. She is married and has 2 children, and we are very proud to have her in our midst. At the conclusion of the speeches, you are invited to enter the member lounge to hear about other artists from the committee members who are wearing their red berets. Diane Stevenson will talk about Jean-Jacques, who painted the portrait of the woman, which has hung in many different places over the years, but currently hangs in the landing across the president's pictures. Sarah Patton will talk about Cornelia Wayburn and her still life with flowers and a yellow shawl that has just returned from the restorer. Trudy Doyle has a fantastic story to tell you about Luciano Torsi, and I'll be speaking about Edna Austin. We are proud to own 2 of her paintings. Other members of the committee, including Wynn Garriolat and Pat Benjamin, have done research and will be happy to answer questions for you today. And thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here tonight.
We always found the same information about Karl Kraft, that he was one of the founding members of the Art League here, that he did certain things, that he was in certain collections. And all of a sudden, digging around, I lucked out and found an online version of his daughter's biography. 2 days ago. So I worked some things in here, and for the videography, a lot of things I might have changed a few little things in between. Anyhow, here we have a photo of the artist as a young man, as well, a comparatively young man. He didn't live to be a very old man, because you can see his dates up there. He was born in Reading, Ohio, not Reading, Pennsylvania, but Reading, Ohio, which I must admit I had never heard of. His father was a Lutheran minister, and several of his brothers went into that profession as well. And the reason I mention it is because he contemplated becoming a Lutheran minister as well. The family moved around a lot, his father changing pulpits, and they lived in Missouri, Kansas, Ohio, Indiana, before settling in Chicago. In 1902, he enrolled at Elmhurst College, which was then pretty much identified with a Lutheran ministry track. And he considered doing that. He also, though, considered becoming a professional musician because he loved music and it was an important part for the rest of his life. In 1907, he married Charlotte, also known as Lottie, by a nickname Lau, and they moved in with her parents. And this was apparently not a very good idea. But if you're a young, up-and-coming artist, it's a very practical idea, to be realistic. They moved out as soon as they were able. He started doing commercial work. And here I'm just showing you a couple of things that jumping way ahead, the booklet of the Art League from 1940, courtesy of Edie. She found it at the History Museum. And as I say, he turns out, and I'm jumping ahead, was one of the founders of that Oak Park Art League, which of course is still here on Chicago Avenue. He started doing commercial art and doing etchings like this one. Just a small piece. They were tended to be very small, 5 by 7 or 6 by 8, and most of his paintings were not really large either. But he worked at several different commercial firms in Chicago. He did all kinds of designs and so forth. He went, during the years from 1907 to roughly 1920, he attended classes at the Art Institute off and on, sometimes at night, sometimes when he could take the time, and had built up enough cash reserves during the day. In 1912, he had his first participation in one of the Art Institute annual exhibitions, of which we call the Chicago Vicinity Shows, that went on for 50 years or something like that. And he showed 2 works in 1912 there. In 1913, and thereabouts, and a lot of his paintings, most of his paintings are not dated. But you can tell certain things from the subjects. He started these somewhat impressionistic things with figures that, not that they physically look like a Renoir, but sort of these things of, women lounging in gardens or decorative landscapes like this. No great profundity, but they were popular kinds of things of the day. And then he started changing a little bit in style. And there was a series of works from the teens and early 20s, and here's just one example, that are almost pastel-like and comparatively ethereal. That's not the mature work that we will eventually see, but I just wanted to show you where he came from. He discovered the Ozarks. In 1913, he had his first trip to the Ozarks with 2 painter friends, and he helped found a Society of Ozark Painters, where he was a president in 1914, right after it started. And we see still a comparatively soft palette and sort of delicate treatment of trees in this work that, again, help identify it with that era. This work is in the collection of the Union League Club in Chicago, as will be the next one. I'm showing you they picked up several of his works, and he was comparatively successful in the Chicago area, although bringing art in from the Ozarks, his trips also to Brown County in Indiana, and the various other places. And they were mostly, I won't say decorative, but I'd say they were mostly in a sort of pleasing and an impressionistic sort of style, although very much his own. This one still shows, again, that softness, although he really plays with contrast here between the foreground bushes and stuff in the background under a very, very soft lighting. Also, a work owned by the Union League Club. Then, he sort of deserted his image, which he has as the painter poet of the Ozarks, which he was described as in a fine arts journal from Chicago. And he started to do other things. But meanwhile, he was still doing a lot of those same kind of works. In 1920, he got the Logan Medal at the Chicago Vicinity Show. That was a long time Art Institute thing, the Logan family, they were big in the Columbian Exposition and so forth. He had a solo exhibition in later 1920 at the Art Institute, his own one-man show. In 25, he got the gold medal of the Allied Artists of America in New York City. And then he started working along the Mississippi River. And I think this is the only one I have of that type. Again, it's very hard to identify where a lot of the works are, especially by date. He started doing what we call industrial scenes and things of longshoremen. And this is a very typical example, even though you have to take my word for it. The only one I can show you of that type, and which these things recall a lot of the work of some of his friends who were, that he worked with through the Art Institute and so forth, who were influenced by what has been called the Ashcan School in New York from the early 20th century. People in the area around John Sloan and Bellows and so forth, several of whom would take teaching gigs, and Leon Kroll was one of them, about 1918, 19, at the Art Institute, and definitely he got to know his work there. In 1921, he helped found the Austin, Oak Park, and River Forest Art League, as it was at first called, and he was its first president. So he was not just a local artist, but he was someone who had some standing in the art world, and the regional art centers, like Oak Park, were actually quite important, and they had strong ties until fairly recently with suburban areas, and some of you may remember, or even may be part of the Women's Associates of the Art Institute for the Western Suburbs and stuff, all of which were closed down a few years ago as they increasingly got wisdom before they got rid of their volunteer tour guides too. Very strange place, the Art Institute, that way. He moved with his family here in 1927 into Oak Park. And he painted in several areas in the forest preserves, right here. He taught outdoor painting classes for the Art Institute in the Palos Park area. And he actually had his own school of teaching art in Willow Springs. So he really kept his arms around there. He started to do portraits too, and his color palette got stronger and more pronounced. So even these landscapes, and then he continued to do a lot of landscapes, I think you can see a little more dramatic strength of color and brushstroke as he moved on into the 20s. He still continued to go back to the Ozarks almost till the end. Here's, of course, our painting of 28, and he did achieve substantial success and reputation for his winter scenes. He's not the first one. John Bachman, earlier at the end of the 19th century, similarly did that, but in New England, then in France. He did it here, but there's ties to a tradition of, again, making winter landscapes that still have strong color and so forth, in spite of our thinking in terms of snow and so forth. In 1928, believe it or not, he and his family opened a restaurant in Oak Park. I'd certainly never known that.
No.
Before it was called the Round Table Sandwich Shop and Tea Room. It lasted 5 years. The Depression did it in, but his daughter worked taking the cash register, his wife worked as a waitress. It lasted 5 years, and it didn't close right away. He sold it to the chef.
Oh.
So, I mean, there's a tidbit, you know, for your next cocktail party. He achieved a lot of critical success around the country in those last few years, but the Depression really did him in. And not only did it, but he got pretty depressed himself, and in 1935, he had a nervous breakdown. He continues to do the Ozark things. I'm just showing you the last few through 1932, another one. This one is undated, and I may have it out of order. I really don't know when that one is. Another classic, you know, Winter Scene. A work of that sort of last few years. A Winter Scene with a little bit of a genre element here. Another Winter Scene. Another one. And then a more tranquil one. And there are a few of those. He also did some Western scenes, although I can't identify exactly where or when he was out in the Rockies, but he was. And then he did some caricatures and humorous drawings in his last years. Will Davies in 1930 was his daughter's husband.
Oh.
But he did his daughter too. And there was fascinating stuff about the family and how the wife's jealousy when he was nude models.
Wow.
And there's one anecdote talked about how he was seen out in a carriage with a nude model, and the wife was going to find out, well, she wasn't completely nude, she put a cape on, and she heard her husband had had a heart attack, so he drove her quickly there. But, you know, just all kinds of interesting familial stuff is in this biography. He died very young. He stopped exhibiting after the nervous breakdown in 1935. And then he died. Here's just one more painting. I think that's the last one. Yes. He died. He just gave up, didn't do any more art. After those caricatures were among the last things he did. And he passed on. His reputation was never, you know, huge. It was sort of regional, but when he'd show with other places like the Carnegie in Pennsylvania or in New York, he had opportunities and he showed and won prizes. But he never became sort of on the bigger national scene. And he sold well, but not enough. So when the market started drying up after the Depression, the paintings were starting to go for less than the price of framing them. And so it was sort of a tragic end. He remained well known in the Chicago area. It's interesting though, the Art Institute, you can't find the works that they own on their webpage. I was able to find all kinds of other, when I put in his name, nothing in alphabetical order showed up. Maybe there somewhere, and here's a person who again had a one-man show there. Now again, that's partially the Art Institute that has never been interested in its historical local artists and stuff like that. And various curators who love to deaccession them in order to buy some cutting-edge thing. But he was definitely a good artist. His prices have been all over the place. Again, some of the time when I'm starting to look it up, gee, that's a really low on the price at auction. And then I'd see it's for an 8 by 10 painting. You know, the size of this screen barely. So some of it is tied to the way he did things. And because he was traveling around so much, he didn't do a lot of big paintings, especially he was doing plein air on the scene. So that's Carl Craft. You see, we have his nicely clean and restored painting, and he's a really an important part of our park's artistic history.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
This will be a dramatic change in focus from a painter who obviously was well-known regionally and produced a lot of paintings. The emphasis on this story is on the good old 19th century club, women's club. I'll stick with it because that was the title when our person was involved. I'm proud to be here today to introduce you to a great Oak Park woman and member of the 19th century women's club, Blanche Wayburn Kerr. I'll spare you the genealogy, but Blanche was my wife, Catherine Gervais' great aunt. So Blanche was my great aunt-in-law. I never knew her personally, having married into the extended family 10 years before her death. But I've been in charge of our archives at the Oak Park River Forest Museum, so I have the data. Blanche Wayburn was born into a Universalist family in Rockford in 1872. She studied art at Rockford College. She was in the first class of the newly built Art Institute of Chicago in 1893. As a graduate student, she must have appreciated the arts that were shown at the Columbian Exposition that same year. While at the Art Institute, she met a fellow Universalist, Robert Kerr, known as Bert, also born in 1872. Bert graduated from Northwestern University in 1894, got his law degree there, and was accepted to the bar in 1895. They were married in the Christian Union Church in Rockford in 1896. The couple settled in a home in Oak Park at what is now 113 South Elmwood. The Kerr home had wide porches, a spacious parlor, 5 bedrooms, and a finished third-floor ballroom that Blanche would make into her art studio. The house changed hands a few years ago. I got to go through it. It was fantastic.
But is it still standing, Bob?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a beautiful home.
Cool.
Bert and Blanche Kerr soon became members of the Unitarian Universalist Unity Church of Oak Park. Now that's when it was still down on, not the Unity Temple, before Unity Temple. They met the young architect Frank Lloyd Wright and his wife Catherine Tobin Wright, as well as Frank's mother Anna Lloyd Wright. In 1897, the Kerrs were founding members of the Lowell, a literary club, which still exists in Oak Park and celebrated its 125th anniversary last year. Blanche joined the 19th Century Women's Club in 1898, and later the Infant Welfare Society. Bert served on the board of the library at the Scoville Institute and was legal counsel for the Art Commission. They were members of the Lime Kiln Club, a social club, founding members of the Westward Ho Golf Club, which was below Madison, and of that was in 1898, and of the River Forest Tennis Club in 1905. The clubhouse was designed in 1906 at Bert's request in the studio of their friend Frank Wright, aided by Charles White and Vernon Watson. The Kerrs and the Wrights became connected to Jane Addams and her Hull House, which had been founded in 1889. Blanche worked as an occupational therapist at Hull House, visiting people by streetcar when necessary. Jane Addams encouraged the arts and education. Wright had been a founding member of the Chicago Arts and Crafts Society at Hull House in 1897, and Blanche Kerr helped found the Arts and Crafts Society in Oak Park. In November 1900, she hosted in her studio at 113 South Elmwood an exhibit and sale by local arts and crafts supporters including Frank Wright. Meanwhile, Bert's younger brother, Dr. Ellis Kerr, had settled in Oak Park. He was one of the founders of West Suburban Hospital, which opened in 1914. Ellis Kerr, there is a connection here. Ellis Kerr married Oak Parker Dorothy Charlton. Among her many accomplishments was being the first woman to serve as a trustee of the Village of Oak Park from 1927 to 1945, thanks to the work of the 19th Century Women's Club. She was president of the club from 1928 to 1930. That would be Blanche's sister-in-law. Bert Kerr was very successful professionally. Between 1896 and his early death in 1918, he practiced law with his father. He specialized in American corporate law, including Mexican. He was fluent in Spanish and made his first trip to Mexico in 1900. In 1910, he published books in both Spanish and English related to Mexican civil and commercial law. In October 1910, Bert and Blanche attended the formal ball given by Mexican President Porfirio Diaz, right before the Mexican Revolution. And I'll have this out front, but this is a picture of her in her ball gown, which stayed in the family forever. She was very proud of that. But the Mexican Revolution happened immediately. A month later, the revolution against Diaz began with the involvement of the American government. For 3 days after the capture of the seaport city of Veracruz by the Americans in 1914, Bert was the temporary civil governor of the city. Because of these professional demands, Bert and Blanche spent much of their time in Mexico. Blanche pursued her painting and exhibited in Mexico City, where they stayed at the American Country Club. She and Bert rode horseback into areas where locals had never seen a white woman before. Bert died, unfortunately, of typhoid fever in Mexico City in 1918 and was buried there. Now we're getting into the Oak Parky stuff. Frank Wright was not the only architect the Kerrs knew well. Blanche's younger sister, Jane Wayburn, had married Samuel Saxby in 1900 in Rockford. One of Jane's bridesmaids was Alice Roberts, you'll start recognizing names here, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Charles Roberts of Oak Park. Alice Roberts married architect Charles White, a Massachusetts Institute of Technology graduate in Rockford. They moved to Oak Park in 1903, where he worked in the studio of Frank Wright for 2 years, helping with the design of the River Forest Tennis Club. Blanche also knew the architect James Lincoln Fife, F-Y-F-E, and his wife Hannah By Fife, more Oak Park names, through Unity Church congregation. James Lincoln Fife was the architect for the 1928 19th Century Women's Club building here. In 1909, backing up in time, the household of Bert and Blanche Kerr changed drastically. Blanche's younger sister, Jane Wayburn Saxby, separated from her husband, moved to Oak Park with their 3 children to live at 113 South Elmwood with Bert and Blanche Kerr, who had no children. In order to have enough room for the extended family, Bert Kerr and his father traded houses in 1910. The elder Kerrs moving to 113 South Elmwood Avenue, and the Kerr-Saxby family taking over 150 North Elmwood Avenue, a significantly larger 19-room home. Still there. In 1913, Blanche and Jane even brought their parents from Rockford to live with them at 150 North Elmwood. And there are photographs of all this. Traveling outside of Oak Park, Blanche Kerr served as a teacher in the shop of the Henry Favell School of Occupational Therapy in Chicago, at the Vocational School for Shut-ins at Hull House, and at the Pine Knoll Girls Camp in New Hampshire. After her husband's untimely death in 1918, Blanche continued her interest in art. Between 1918 and 1927, she and her sister ran home crafts, design, and interior decorating business from their home. Sister Jane Saxby was also a member of the 19th Century Women's Club, died in 1927. Blanche attended the Century Progress World's Fair in Chicago in 1933, being very interested in the art that was on display there. And there's a book about that in the archives at the museum. She also hosted paying guests to the fair in her large home here in Oak Park, which was a common thing to do during that World's Fair. Blanche regularly hosted art events and exhibits at 150 North Elmwood, which with such notable guests as Grace Hall Hemingway, May Estelle Cook, Little Oak Park, remember her?
Yes.
Carl Kraft, and Cornelia Weber, who we'll hear more about. The two women were not personally related. Blanche's father was a Weyburn and Cornelia's husband was a Weyburn. They were cousins from New York State. Blanche was a charter member of the Art Society in Rockford. She was also a charter member of the Austin, Oak Park, and Herb Forest Art League in 1921, serving as director, teacher, decorator, and lecturer. In 1925, she traveled to Paris for the International Exhibition of Modern, Decorative, and Industrial Arts. The other art societies she belonged to were the Fine Arts Academy of Illinois, the All Illinois Society of Fine Arts, the Society for Sanity in Art, the Arts Club of Chicago, and the alumni of the Art Institute. Our club historian, Marianne Porichnik, reports that according to club yearbooks, Blanche Weyburn Kerr had a life membership in the 19th Century Women's Club and was most active in the early 1900s. She was a member of the literature and music departments into the 20s, served on the board, chaired the art department, and served on the social, decor, and village improvement committees, as well as being delegate to the Art League. Blanche Weyburn Kerr died in 1955 at age 83 at the Gervais family home at 201 North Linden. Besides housing her archives, the OPRF Museum also has her wedding dress from 1896, her easel and palette, and her painting of children around the maypole in Austin Gardens. So I'll have this out at the painting, but here's a picture of her at her easel in the home at 113 South Elmwood. And I'll close by reminding you that the Oak Park River Forest Museum has a very nice collection of art. And they have several Oak Park painters there, including Blanche. So it's definitely worth a visit. Thank you.
This is a portrait that Cornelia Morton Weyburn did. She actually lived here in Oak Park for a while and did a lot of her activities, and including being here at the 19th century at one point. She was born in 1878 in Chicago, and she grew up. They moved a little bit, but she moved to Oak Park, her family. And she continued to live in Oak Park until 1967 when she moved to Woodlawn, California to be with her daughter. She attended the School of the Art Institute, and after that she began painting oil paintings. And Cornelia's paintings are known for her landscapes and her still lifes. So you can sort of see that in her painting, which has been restored recently. So we never saw the scarf, we never saw a lot of the details, and now getting it restored, it really shows what a great artist she was. and still lifes, which is sort of this, you know, it's a combination. So I have not seen any other paintings of
Any
hers.
landscapes or anything?
No, I tried to.
And when was this? Do you remember when this one was painted?
I think, well, she was in the Art Institute. She was born in 1878, so I'm guessing,
In the teens or 20s?
yeah,
maybe?
yeah, sometime in there. Cornelia married Ralph Wayburn, and they raised two children, Lenore Harriet and Ralph B. Jr. in Oak Park. And Cornelia's husband was also an artist, interestingly enough. But I think he did paintings for businesses and that kind of thing. She was a co-founder of the Austin Oak Park River Forest Art League and was also a charter member of the Cordon Club in Chicago, which was founded in 1917 and closed in 1943. She taught for 6 years at the Art Institute of Chicago and at the Austin Oak Park and River Forest Art League.
And was that, do you think that was the one on Chicago Avenue?
Yes, yes.
So it's all, even though
But we
it's
don't know if it
Austin,
was there at that time,
At that time.
but it existed. She also taught privately, and she was also a member of the All Illinois Society of Fine Arts in Chicago. And her paintings were exhibited in many different galleries in Chicago and Oak Park, and she received several awards for her artwork during her lifetime. She died in California at her daughter's in 1972. However, she and her husband are buried at Forest Home Cemetery. And I haven't gone yet to see her grave, but I will.
Is that in Forest Park?
Yeah, Forest
Yeah,
Park,
that's the
right.
one in Forest Park.
Yeah,
So
so
she lived pretty long.
she lived a pretty long life, and I do also have a picture of her.
And how did we get this?
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows, okay.
But I have to show you a picture of her,
You worked in the field and you...
possibly standing in this very room.
Oh, how cool.
There she is, and she's got her smock on, and this is her daughter. And this was a painting thing going on here with easels, etc. So it's interesting, and you can see that the stairs. So I'm sort of thinking maybe it was this room or maybe it was out in the hall. I don't know exactly.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, isn't it?
Could I see
Sure.
without standing up?
And she's wearing what looks like a bathrobe or something.
Oh, that's what I usually wear.
And also,
Wanna get so
I
you can see without
found
the
this
light.
book online, and it's School Memories, and guess who was the
School memories from what?
designed by Cornelia Morton Wayburn. And so I think she did all the
All the little designs
the
on
little
the top of
designs.
the-
So it's
yes.
a generic school book.
It's a generic
Okay,
school.
like
and
an
it's
autograph book or
copyright
something like that.
1914.
You know, that actually, that picture would be interesting to have displayed with
Yes.
this write-up
Yeah,
about her
and
too.
Yes.
standing on this
If
side
it,
with the
if
light
it really is
on the-
taken in the
Yeah,
building.
she's a most interesting person.
I don't know if you
It's
can really
just
tell.
amazing how the artwork popped out with it.
Oh my gosh,
Oh my gosh,
absolutely.
it's so
You
exciting.
couldn't even see any of
No,
this.
you couldn't
the
see
scarf
anything
or
on
whatever it is.
many of them.
So do you think this is taken in this
Yes,
building?
it was taken in this building.
Then that would be kind of interesting to have under her thing
It
too.
says,
Taken at the
At the
19th century.
yeah, and that's her, and that's her daughter.
What does
do you
it
think?
cost to restore something like this?
Well, they had,
I know they have grants,
but
but
it's a
still.
lot.
It sort of depends on
yeah,
what, but they also did the frame.
The frame, yeah.
yes.
Yeah, the frame's lovely too.
Oh, yeah.
And they
If you
are
don't
buried
see
at
the
Forest,
Forest Home, yeah.
Forest Home. So you could, just.
I mean, because she was in California for how long?
Well, she went there in 1967.
Well,
And then she
only
went,
about-
and
only
then
about
she moved
10,
to her
12
daughter, and then
years.
she died in 1972.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a long time there.
No, but, well, if they were both artists, you wonder if there had to be family money, because I don't know how few would be able to support yourself if your husband and wife were both.
Well, I think she probably, it sounds like she had, she belonged to some of these organizations, so she was able to sell her paintings there, but then she
Still, it's
also had galleries
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and then she was teaching here, obviously.
That's true, and if she was teaching,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
No, but that first, um,
Luciano Torsi was born in Arezzo in Italy, November 27, 1939, and moved to Livorno, Italy at an early age. He's a self-taught artist whose works have been shown in exhibitions worldwide. As Torsi developed his skills as an artist, his work became widely recognized, and he became an academic professor at the Institute of Culture and Arts in Rome. Today, at the age of 83, he continues to work in his studio on a busy street in Livorno. It was there that we were able to pay him a visit in May of this year during our tour of Italy. His current paintings capture the sunlight and beautiful landscape of Tuscany, or Toscano, as Luciano liked to say. Fields of sunflowers burst from his canvases. He was delighted to see the picture that we showed him of this earlier work that's part of our collection. This painting in the collection of the 19th Century Charitable Association was likely painted during the period when Torsi was often referred to as the painter of woods. His website is filled with photos of such works. To date, we've been unable to identify the donor of this painting or the date that it came into our collection. As with many of the works in our collection, there are no records of how this painting came to the club. However this painting came to our collection, we are happy to have it.
Yes. Well, now hold up the picture of you with the artist.
And here I am with the picture of Luciano and his colleague, Annetta.
Okay, and that's you with
And that's me.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Take a glance at the painting for a moment before I share some information about the artist. The painting before you was probably named something like Head of a Young Woman, typical of Gustave Jean Jacquet's work. And you see it here in the frame, his name as well as signed right here. This is typical of his works, classical portraiture showing elegance and beauty. We don't know how the painting was acquired by the 19th century. It is one of our more valuable paintings. Gustave Jean Jacquet was born in Paris in 1846, and he died in Paris in 1909 at the age of 63. Now, he must have shown early talent, prodigy, and had a supportive family because he studied as an adolescent and young man with a very well-known and well-regarded painter of the time, Monsieur Bouguereau. Bouguereau was considered an academic painter in the mid to late 1800s, whose themes were traditional, using classic subjects with heavy emphasis on the female body. So you can see influences of the teacher, Bouguereau, on Jacquet, this student. And Jacquet was considered one of Bouguereau's top students. Now, switching over the Salon de Paris, I don't know if that rings a bell with you, but that was an annual exhibit of the best newer art of the time. And it was the place to set yourself as an artist, a well-respected and artist of the time. It was highly competitive, highly regarded. So Jacquet was admitted to exhibit at the Salon de Paris in 1865 when he was just 19. So that was quite an honor, and he was selected to exhibit in subsequent years, and he won medals there. So it helped, exhibiting at the Salon de Paris helped cement an artist's reputation and their professional livelihood, the place to be recognized. But to put Jacquet's style in some context, the Impressionist painters were also painting from the mid to the late 1800s. So picture in your mind a work of Monet or Renoir. It's very different from our classical painting and subject matter here. And the Impressionist was more, of course, impressionistic, but outdoors, plein air. He did more And in fact, pieces at the Salon de Paris, pieces that did not adhere to the Academy's traditional tastes, were rejected. And the rejected artists had a more difficult time being recognized for their work. The Impressionists were not initially accepted to the Salon de Paris, and in fact, there was some uproar about that, and they established their own salon, Salon des Refusés, those who were refused. So back to Jacquet. He followed a more traditional path, and his successful career then took off at age 19, and he did get attention for some of his more he was involved in the Franco-German War, and so he got attention for some of his war themes and horseback riding. At the time, a well-known art critic, Monsieur Edmond, said, "Behold an artist unknown today who will be celebrated tomorrow." Jacquet quickly gained fame and notoriety for his technical virtuoso, his paintings of women both strong and delicate, as well as historical genre scenes of women and soldiers in 16th, 17th, and 18th century costume. So again, his work was much more traditional and kind of looking back in some ways. He enjoyed working on smaller pieces. His models were not always classically beautiful, but they were always vibrant and full of life. He worked tirelessly, producing many paintings, imbuing them with a minuteness, grace, and beauty, classical style and approach. And you can see the beauty in that painting. It's really lovely.
My goodness.
So back to the forecast of Monsieur Edmond. Behold an artist unknown today, but who will be celebrated tomorrow. Although the works did apply to Jacquet and his works do remain collectible today, his words could be applied even more so to the renegade artists, the Impressionist painters, whose work today is in major art galleries and sold for upwards of, $100 million. So Jacquet's works are housed in many important public and private institutions throughout the world, in Paris, Rouen, England, the Brooklyn Museum of Art, the Art Institute of Chicago, and the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the 19th Century Charitable Association. So.
Cool.
This
This is a picture of it. It would be so expensive to maintain.
That was the Austin home in
That was
Austin
the Austin
Gardens.
home in
Oh,
Austin
huge.
Gardens.
So this is their
And
home.
so it was
see
torn
it?
down.
So they tore it down.
They tore it down.
And it made it Austin Gardens.
Oh,
So this is their,
This is the house in
this is the
Austin
house.
Gardens. Well, they deeded it to the Park District, which still owns the property.
Right.
But the Park
This is
District couldn't maintain it, so they tore it down.
Right. So this is their marriage certificate for Henry and Edna. Those are their signatures down there, which I always like to save. Even my own family, I was like, got my mom her signature. I love it. But they were married in Snohomish, Washington. This is them. She was always very peaceful looking. I mean, she didn't smile big. She just has this very, gentle face.
And this is because she was president of the club.
And she was a president of this club.
Okay.
This is the same lady from 1920 to 1921. So in those days, they only were president for a year. I'm sure our president would like that. And I think I have it. She was in her 40s when she was the president, and that's another thing, the presidents were younger. So this one is called, it's a skating scene, and this one's called Still Waters with the children, and this one is River or Lakeshore with figures. There are no real names. She didn't give it a name, and we really don't, like I said, we don't know when it was donated. Did she paint them and give them to the club at that time, or did they have it in the house and then when they tore it down they donated it? We don't know that. Unfortunately, that's the truth about all
of our oil paintings. We don't know when they were donated, we don't know who gave them to us. We looked at every single piece of historical information that we could find, and we don't know. So I want to tell you a little bit about the art at this time as well. This work, these types of things were created in the United States during a period after the Great Depression. Right? So artists were urged to portray subjects from the lives of ordinary Americans. And it was called regionalism. So it wasn't, new avant-garde, it wasn't impressionism, it was what they saw in life here around in their neighborhood. So that's what they were trying to promote at that time. So in the 1920s, the popularity of artwork, I think David even may have mentioned that, was a non-professional. You just wanted to go and enjoy it in your neighborhood, go for painting. Many middle-class Americans enjoyed painting on their own. They went to classes and they exhibited their work locally. Austin was evidently one of those amateurs who found that civic and social clubs could provide them with a means of showing their work. So that's what she enjoyed. I think the Historical Society does have another piece of hers as well. So they're around in there. If we look at maybe the high school, we might find more, or the library.
Right.
We might find more of her things. So we want to do those kinds of research in the neighborhood. That's about it. Edna was very involved. She founded the Oak Park Council of International Affairs. She believed in education and this international affairs. So she and her husband traveled to Mexico. They were in Canada. They were in Europe and Belgium, all many places. And one interesting thing is that there are 2 schools in the world that are named after her. One is, I don't know if this is still true, but in Senegal, Africa? Senegal in Africa? And in Colombia, South America. So that's pretty crazy that she was all over there. She probably visited
I thought you were
there.
going to say a big impression, maybe.
Right? Exactly. It's crazy. So she was a member of the First Congregational Church of Oak Park for her life. She was also a life member here of 19th century and president from 20 to 21. She served on the high school board. And I think that, and David didn't quite mention that, but before that, only men were on school board, the village boards, the president of anything. Women were not allowed. So it was the fighting that we did and from this club. We changed.
And they started with the school boards.
Yes, they started with the school boards
And
because that's where their children are. So they want to have a say in their
Because the
children's
law
lives.
allowed women to be on those boards, but that was the significance of when I mentioned Dorothy, what's her name? To get
Blanche.
to be a village trustee. No, Charlton.
Charlton, yeah.
Her.
Yeah.
To be a village trustee was a whole level up.
Yes, exactly. And of course, to get the vote was on their list of things to do. So she also served on the high school board, the Oak Park Symphony. She was a founder also of the Oak Park River Forest Day Center, which many of our members were. And of course, you know that we still donate blankets and soft goods to the babies. And then she was not only a member here in all these organizations, but she was also involved in Chicago organizations. Amazing, these people just never stopped. So yeah, I think we should be pretty proud that we have 2 of her pieces. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Edie.
Thank you. Thank you for asking.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Sure.